survey. But I think that we've found an innovative way using learning methodology or teaching methodology to engage with potentially younger users and to find a way for the Body Shop to change its entire approach to online training. And yeah, so cross your fingers and toes for me that this works because they will be doing a lot more of these programs and hopefully more expensive as well. This is a small site. Michael Holman is the ex-Africa correspondent for the Financial Times. He retired early because he developed Alzheimer's disease at the very young age of 40. And what we're doing is we're helping to put his body of work in digital format. Because of the Alzheimer's, he's finding it increasingly difficult to write and type. And from that perspective, he's essentially paper archiving. He's been a reporter since 1974. He's extremely valuable. And it's also, he was reporting on Africa during a very, very interesting period, most notably when apartheid in South Africa was demolished. So from that perspective, the content here is valuable from a historical perspective, but also from an information perspective. So there's value in saving an archive like this. So yes, he's not even a business, it's a guy with a problem who we're helping out. And here, this is the website. It's a lovely little grid. We've got a real mix of content here. We've got books, we've got articles or news reportage, we've got content, we've got where he writes about travel, we've got where he writes obituaries, we've got areas where he's written speeches. So the classification of the content was quite complicated. So what we did is we built this is basically a blog. So what we can do then is we categorize our different kinds of content, but we decided rather than having a traditional homepage, big, nice, fat image, 3 little boxes on the bottom, yes, you know what I'm talking about, we would actually just spill the content front page and give the user the ability to browse. This uses parallax, so if you scroll, it just continues to load, however many there are. Just by the way, parallax doesn't work well on mobile devices, so you have to write a different way of how to access that because of the inherent problem with scrolling. So thinking about how the user will use the swipes, the scrolls, and the clicks. Navigation here wasn't that much of a challenge, but we found a lovely little way to do it so that this is the most this is the logical space to put a menu, either top left or top right. It's where the user knows to click for things, show the content as it goes, and opening that menu in a lovely little slider motion. Again, this is all dynamic with images, without images, with video, without audio. Speaking about audio, there's a lot of interviews on here, which is why that's relevant. The Vimeo is the preferred library that we use at the moment. From a cost perspective, we found it the most cost effective. It's about $70 a year for a license. And Vimeo helps us to convert everything on their side so that we don't have to convert the video server side. On the Body Shop in particular, we started out with video conversion on the server because we knew we had this version of Flash and this version of HTML. We're moving that as well now to Vimeo because the browsers, particularly the mobile browsers, are changing so quickly in terms of their rendering capabilities. It's easier for us to have a professional video converter service, YouTube, Vimeo, whoever, do that load for us, and it also keeps the load of the server as well as the storage space. So $70 a year is fantastic. The problem with Vimeo is they don't do audio. So rather than having a separate audio library for all of these little interviews, what we have to do is effectively make it still GIF, then turn the audio track basically into a still video with sound, and then upload it in Vimeo. But there's a neat little trick. These things have amazing APIs. So for us, we can now take the Vimeo library or Vimeo account from a user account and link it up to our content management system. So rather than the user having to fiddle about with different logins and trying to work out where they have to put which bits of information, we pull all of that stuff in and they simply select it. So basically, it looks as if Vimeo is integrated into the content management system, which is kind of cool. And it solves a lot of technical headaches. Video. This is a lovely client. They import wine, clearly, but they import to the B2B sector. So they supply people like Lugano Locatelli or famous hotels like the Ritz. The wines that they import, they have exclusive right to sell in the UK, and it's great to have them as a client because every time we have a meeting, we get to tastings. So it's absolutely brilliant. The reason I'm showing you this is because we have dynamic maps. So where, as they approach new producers or suppliers, the maps change and grow, which is all well and good. With HTML5, I can happily plot dots on the map, yay, no problem. But as soon as I start to shrink that screen, the JavaScript goes nuts because it has to recalculate the positioning of those points. Now, it's fine if I've got a small image and I've got a couple of points, but they're all over the world. I've got New Zealand, Guadeloupe, Italy, Bulgaria. So from that perspective, there's a lot of recalculation to do every time I move that screen, and it literally starts to become incrementally worse. The quicker I move it up, close and open, I crash the browser. So from that perspective, it's fine to have beautiful, lovely little maps, nice and easy way to search on a larger monitor or fixed size. But when it comes to the mobile version, we had to make a decision in terms of speed and efficiency and what is the user doing. I'm on a mobile, I'm probably in a car or taking delivery, I'm in a hotel. I don't have a computer there in a hotel, I'm on my phone, their computers are the till points. So from that perspective, we made it nice and easy for the sommeliers to have a quick, easy, searchable list. So from that perspective, the information design on this particular project was a particular challenge in terms of where to do and what to go. It's fine if I've got a picture and text, but when it starts with dynamic interactive functionality like this, you really need to plan well, lots and lots of post-it notes, lots and lots of testing. This really is just a baby project. They were at the COP Summit the last 2 weeks in Warsaw. I don't know if you guys know about this. It's where all the big environmental decisions get made. They campaign for integrating health and climate in developing countries much closer. So for example, in Haiti at the moment, if you can avoid, well, the typhoon would be a good start, but if you can avoid an epidemic coming out, the environmental impact is less. So the two are quite narrowly interchanged. This was quite a simple one to make a mobile version. No real challenges, apart from the fact that here we got lucky. Client with no text on the images and no, yay. So we don't have any issues with our custom fonts or anything like that. I can just happily shrink my page, drop it nice and softly, and then just making sure that the navigation here knows where it's going when I'm on the mobile. So because I've effectively got 2, maybe 3 levels sometimes, I know to drop it open and to drop it open. So just finding a way for the user to move easily deeper and deeper and deeper and have an easy way back without actually having to click a back button. Do you guys know about the International Society of Typographic Designers? Ooh, you should look into that. As you might be aware, typography is having a resurgence because we can have web fonts. It's been many, many years since we've tried to have web fonts, and it's finally a reality. Just by the way, on the web font side of things, use proper libraries like Typekit, Linotype, anything like that. The simple reason being, the Google fonts are fine, but on a project where you've got a large body of copy, or where you've got different languages, or even something as simple as a French name. If I have an accent in my name, a lot of the Google typefaces have incomplete or really limited character sets. So when you're selecting the typefaces that you're using, be very, very careful which ones and have a good look at the character set and at the number of weights that are available in that. Weights become super important when you've got dense text and a lot of it. So where you have to find typographical solutions, and I can't always cheat with images. For example, the shilling site I showed you before, the typefaces the branding agency selected don't exist as web type. So then we have two choices. We could either go through an insane amount of conversion through a thing called Font Squirrel, but it's a dirty solution and we don't know how long Font Squirrel's conversion tool is going to work on browsers. So it forced us to code different versions, literally, of which typefaces to load, depending on whether somebody is using Internet Explorer or any of the other browsers. So we actually serve Helvetica on IE, and then we serve the other typefaces on the other browsers. The reason I'm showing you the ISTD is it's fun. I know it's a little bit far away, but you can see that here it's the same home page. I've got different colors and different typefaces. Because these guys are all typographers, no one could agree on which typeface to use for the website. So we said, okay, why don't we just give you a choice? So the user can set the typeface and the colors. That's also got quite a bit of a nice add-on to it. We're talking to Linotype at the moment to see if we can get access to the whole library, so that it's sort of like a real integration and change between what typefaces you can have online and see how that looks in use on an existing site. Yeah, the design on this was probably the most challenging part, just because we're working with designers. So a lot of strong egos and a lot of strong opinions in the room. But I think the solution at the end of the day is something that everybody can live with. This project is actually launching in about a week, so you guys are the first to see. Alcohol Health Network. This is a corporate project, goes to primarily HR and health and safety managers in corporations. It's based on research from UCL that proves that if you make individuals aware of how much they drink, they will automatically start to drink less. That hasn't worked for me yet, but hey ho. It's quite ironic as well in that we're working with Astrum wine cellars at the same time as this one. So in the morning I've got a meeting about how to sell more wine, and in the afternoon I've got a meeting about how to reduce alcohol intake. This project's got a tool that is being used by Kingston University, TfL, and quite a lot of other corporates as part of their employee health schemes. This was, the challenge here was the image. They have custom graphics, which are custom illustrated. So on this graphic, I obviously have much more of the graphic that I can see. But when I shrink it down to mobile size, the graphic looks a bit weird. So from that perspective, we actually created slightly different and more optimized graphics for each of the versions. So it's a little bit more work, particularly for the designers, but the solution is much more elegant. And then don't forget about paper. That was a holistic project, so everything from the brand, the only thing that we had was the name. And the business cards are really lovely. I think this screen is probably better to have a look at, where we use the curve and we actually convince the client to spend just a little bit more money and have a little curve, just so that there's kind of brand recognition going across and something different. A lot of the kind of health programs that are offered to companies, the design is just horrendous. It's awful, and that is awful plastic little weird 50-quid business cards. So from that perspective, his business is really doing well because of the retention of people remembering his business cards. So, and we also do posters and flyers and things, which is interesting. Oxford Street. This is, you all know Oxford Street. That site gets over 1 million visits a year, so it's business critical that it's up. And here we have a particular mobile challenge because the time when you want to look at Oxford Street on your mobile, you're standing in the street trying to find something. So here we did a lot of user testing before we actually signed off the wireframes and decided where to go, because we needed to look at users in different scenarios. You know, this is not a complicated information proposition. Opening hours, where are my shops, contact me, maybe a bit of news, yeah? But it's a lot of information design. So again, always starting on paper. But then we had the idea that our mobile version works a little bit like an app. And this is a web app, not a pure mobile app. And the cool thing about this is that we changed the navigation structure completely. So here, good old-fashioned traditional website, all my tick boxes, I'm sharing my social media, I'm putting in RSS feeds, I'm putting little highlights. Sorry, Jessie J switched in Christmas lights, just cool. On the mobile version, I want to share things, I want to see what's the latest thing, but the most important part here is the navigation. I'm standing on the street, what am I looking for? I'm looking for information, where can I buy, where is Nike? That's really pretty much it. Oh, and public convenience. That's, we had to put that back in the content. Client initially wanted to take it out, but I think the second most common search was where can I go to the loo? On the analytics. So, then the information design challenge is in the shop listing. There are over 350 shops on Oxford Street. So that's a big old data set to display, and it's a boring one. It's opening times and hours. It's not really fun to design that, but it's absolutely essential from the user perspective side. So on the main site, we broke that down into categories, as well as using parallax on the inside, so I could either scroll and you could just load the whole thing, or little shortcuts with ABCD if you know the name of your store. We also have to think that over 50% of our users on this site are tourists. They are people who are coming in from other parts of the UK to visit Oxford Street for a day, or they are actually foreign nationals. So the decision then was very clear in terms of trying to use iconography that is as lowest common denominator as possible, knife and fork, traditional sign, that sort of thing. So that again limits design solutions to some extent because it's such a divergent target audience, and it really is everybody. It's my grandmother, it's your sister, it's whoever. On the mobile version though, loading all of this stuff, it becomes a little bit clunky, and navigation is a particular challenge. So we created categories as a separate screen in addition to our main navigation, but then just provided a simple listing of the shop by name, which you can do, because on a phone, this movement is intuitive. And then obviously just the final result of it, you get to a map integrated to Google's API, and they're being so lovely that you can customize what your little arrows look like. So it's just nice, especially if you look at something like McDonald's, where there's like 6 on Oxford Street, so you've got 6 different little coloured pins, which is just nice little design treats, which you can do. So that's where it's really important that a designer works very closely with a developer, because then you get these kinds of lovely ideas that can be made a reality. So some thoughts. Who's the user? That's it. Who is the user? What are they using? Where and why and when? Is the usage patterns different in the evening to in the morning? So it's about what is the product and who's it for and what are they going to do with it. Use the tools available. Bootstrap, for example, is pretty cool in terms of it's an open source framework that allows you to model and build responsive and normal websites very, very quickly. It's a really good space to practice and play in, and it takes care of the heavy lifting on the coding side of things. So if you're a little bit unsure where that's concerned, Bootstrap is a fantastic resource. Plan, wireframe, plan some more. Navigation architecture. Video is a beast, so consider. And particularly test with video, even if you're using something like Vimeo or YouTube. We have real issues with YouTube. For example, on Oxford Street, the Jessie J video comes from YouTube. And then we had to fiddle about with the code because it insisted on showing the flash video version, so it doesn't run on the mobile device. So then we have to fiddle about again to make sure that it takes the right video. So always test. Think about images. You've seen that most of the complications that we have on creating these are the images. And I've got another project now where I've got a problem where I've got a lot of users in China. It's for the UNDP, and their current site is loading fine anywhere in the Western world, but in China, because they block the traffic coming in, big lovely images on the top, it literally loads like this. When I look at the stats, it's like 35 seconds before this page loads, and here it's like under 2. So from that perspective, ImageScape is a real problem. So we're using responsive web design in a slightly different way on that project, where if we detect on IP number or browser language version that you're Chinese, simplified or traditional, we actually serve a version, which is the RWD version of the site, where we've got very, very small images and not the lovely big ones. So that's just a practical solution to something that you wouldn't normally anticipate when you're designing or planning a project. Web fonts, we've talked a little bit about, and then font size is your consideration. My lovely 10-point on the web browser is great if I'm sitting straight in front of the laptop, but on a mobile device, make it a bit bigger, just so that I can read it. Test, test, test again, and then if you think you're done, you test a little bit more. So really, I hope I've given you a little bit more about the language of touch. And Lee asked me to talk to you a little bit about kind of how it is to work in an agency and how we work. So I don't know, maybe one of you could kick off with a question.
Thank you, Annie. Any questions, please?
How many members do you have in your team?
Sorry?
How many members do you have in the whole team?
Our entire company is 6 people. 4 of those, sorry, yeah. 3 of those are full-time developers. 2 of them are actually based in the Czech Republic. But I fly them, well, they came to do, actually all 6 of us have master's degrees in our varied specialisms. I realized that the other day when I had to do a tender and I had to do backgrounds. But the 2 in the Czech Republic came here to study, and they worked with us for 3 or 4 years, and they wanted to go back home. They're proper like boys, motorbikes, and mummy gives them food kind of thing. But so we work remotely, so it's really important that we have efficient systems in place that we can work well together. So Skype is a godsend. But we use GitHub. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. It's a really good way to, if you're working in a rapid deployment environment, or especially as we do agile development, where you're planning something, but there's a lot of changes that happen along the way. The programmers record what happens in Git, so I can effectively hand the code base over to another developer, so if the one is ill or on a day or whatever, and they can just continue with that project. And also quite importantly that we all use the same CMS framework, although to my annoyance we do have to develop in WordPress on client demand. For example, Oxford Street is studying WordPress, which I would not recommend to anybody who wants to not age prematurely. Then we've got 2 designers, Mark, who's our creative director, he's a Swiss-trained photographer, and Mira, who's actually South Korean. She's an illustrator by trade. She was a product designer, but she's now gone more into web. And then me, so I tend to argue with clients and designers and developers.
Annie?
You say you wouldn't use WordPress. Yeah. Which would you use? Which are the most ideal ones to use?
I think when it comes to proper frameworks, I mean, for simple sites, like something like the Global Health Alliance, WordPress or something like that is absolutely perfect. It's small, it's concise, you can plug in a blog. The problem with WordPress are the plugins, and you have to keep them updated. And we find that on Oxford Street, for example, the plugins start to affect each other. So you update the one plugin, and then somehow, for example, the directory listing doesn't work anymore. They somehow overwrite each other. The reason that's a problem is because you're always working with somebody else's code. So when we start with WordPress, we basically have to strip out the whole thing and then custom code modules to ensure that it stays working. especially because we've got loads of different editors of different skill levels working on that content. We use CakePHP, have done since about 2006. It's smaller in terms of fame than something like Zend or Joomla or Drupal, but it's in the same family. Well, Drupal is slightly different, but they're all open source frameworks, so they base PHP MySQL. And the reason that we use Cake is because it's not as clunky or as big as something like Zend or Interwoven. So when you open it out of the box, the core functionality is much smaller, and then you can add things. Rather than in the case of WordPress, where you've got this huge hoo-ha thing, and then you have to strip out, and hope for the best. So I would use Zend, Drupal, KPHP in terms of building proper systems. So something like Virgin Media, WordPress is not going to cut it. That's custom. Even though you use a framework, there's so much custom code. So as soon as you've got anything that involves workflow, you had a lecture on self-printing or self-publishing. We actually have a client called You Buy Your Books in that space, and there the content management system actually runs the workflow from when that order comes in, going through the print, getting the blocks made for the embossing, all that sort of thing. Is it packed in the box? We calculate the weight of the box so that we know the order, delivery payments, and then ship that off. So from that perspective, again, that was done in PHP, but heavily customized. Second, there's workflow involved, any kind, approval, disapproval, yeah, Drupal, Joomla, PHP.
Any other questions?
How have you seen clients' needs for advertising change?
Wow, I was in advertising in the good old days when we had long lunches and Coke was on the table. And you could still smoke indoors. And advertising at that time, I mean, then web was like a novelty. That's primarily why I came to London, because I worked on youth brands, and I just understood that the internet was going to be the place where information was going to be distributed, and I didn't know anything about it. I mean, I had a Hotmail address, and I still had to go to the library because you couldn't actually do any form of academic research online. Search engines hadn't caught up, Google didn't exist. So from that perspective, it's changed a lot in that advertising now is much more of a marketing mix. It's much more broad spectrum. It's not just the big three, direct marketing, outdoor, TV, radio, print, but it's much more integrated in that we're looking at brand positioning and in communications as a science with touch points. So if you imagine the user as a circle, advertising, marketing, web agencies have to think about every point where that user is going to be touched, whether that's on a t-shirt logo, whether that's on an iPad, whether that is somebody walking with a carrier bag. So that's where you see the advent of things like QR codes being used quite innovatively. Like, seriously, it's a barcode. I don't know what the hoo-ha's about, but hey. It's evolving from that. I also find that it's changing in that you don't have the big behemoths. Even in an agency like WBP or JWT, the big guys, even Mother, those guys, they have small teams that are roughly the size of my company who run projects. It gives better continuity and it gives better knowledge sharing. You can't work in isolation. When I started out, I would go in as a strategic planner and work on one project, then I'd be pulled out and go and work on another one, and I'd probably never see the creative team again. So that has changed completely. The project has become more immersive, but also I think quite expensive because you need a whole team of people to build a Shillings or an Oxford Street. You can't just, well, you can have, it's just easier and better at teamwork. So it's really important that you guys understand the possibilities of programming or code and the limitations of code, and be aware of advancements in things like HTML5, CSS, online video, but also be aware of the human side, that these are people like you and me who have to look at hours and hours of footage and how to make that experience nice, entertaining, and informative, and usable. Did that answer your question?
I was wondering more like what the clients want from you.
Client demands are
Like how-
changing dramatically. For example, we still have to argue about making RWD versions or, getting the client to actually get to Spain to do it. Because to code an RWD version literally takes you 25% longer than just a straight up site. And that includes things like browser testing and trying to get IE to do anything. But clients have become aware more. So some of them are amazing. They're like super tech. But I mean, the number of clients who we actually install the email on their mobile phones for them is staggering. No, seriously. We now have blog posts saying this is how you do email. So the knowledge, the awareness is there, but the knowledge is lacking. So they demand, for example, Samaria, they demand a mobile version, but I tell them this technology is not going to do RWD, so you're going to have two. And then they go, fine, as long as it works well. I don't think it was the best solution. Clients have become much more demanding in terms of what they expect. They assume certain things. For example, you have to be very clear to specify in every quote that you send that whether multilingual versions are included or not. And that even includes print, and you'd think clients would know better. I had a case the other day where we made the first map ever of all the gas pipelines in the Caucasus. Don't ask. And this map didn't exist before. We created it from a whole batch of hoo-ha things. Of course, we were paid to do that. But it's a lot of design work, it's a lot of information to write. And then it was sort of just assumed that it would be delivered in Russian. And I'm going, no, naughty. And clients are getting very naughty. The same one here is the map, the contract for creating the map was for use on PDF and on an event conference website. Then I get a request from a printer. Now they want to do a big billboard with it at this conference. I'm going, this is not really good because licensing doesn't work like this. When you license your work, image production, graphics, custom illustration, what are those licensed terms? Ours was for specific use in specific media on this particular project because they tightened the screws on budget unbelievably, so we're restricting in use so that I can get it done cheaper. So clients are getting naughtier by the day. You give them a little finger and they'll eat you all the way up to the elbow. But with that said, when you create proposals and quotations, just be as specific as possible and understand copyright and understand that relationship and make sure that the client is on board. Sometimes everybody does it. You push and see if the advantage comes. And you need to have confidence to push back, which in the current climate is very, very difficult. I've had to up my negotiation skills quite dramatically in the last couple of years. It used to be you give a quote, this is the scope, sign off, done, and the boss would come and look at certain stages and they pretty much let you get on with the project. It's sort of the old agency model. Clients now are very much more involved, very much day to day. They're aware of content management. They want it to be easy. They need everything content managed, and that gives its own problems, especially with things like forms. They've become more demanding. They've become more aware, but the knowledge still has quite a lot of catching up to do. And budgets are a problem. So from my perspective, I actually went on a sales course the other day. In my life, I never thought I would do that. No, really. I don't see myself as a salesperson. But to learn negotiation skills in terms of how to make sure that the client gets what they want and they feel listened to, but that we don't get the short end of the stick. So that's, I think, been the biggest change is that you have to push back much harder. Also for the designers, it's changed a lot. In the olden days, you had like your superstars. You had Neville Brodies and Michael Wolffs. Now it's a little bit more flat. There's fewer gods and a lot more Indians. In terms of, it's kind of expected that a designer can present a concept eloquently. I had a tender the other day where the first design iteration was part of the tender requirements, and I submitted a tender, and I refused to submit a design. I don't do creative tenders. I haven't done my research, and design is not, you don't go, oh, I like red, and let's go that way. Design is based in research. Who are our users? What is it for? What do they want to do on the site? What are the communication objectives? Am I trying to sell something? Am I trying to communicate something? What do I want the user to do? I can't design a site without knowing that. Well, I could design a site anyway. My designers design sites. But so it was really interesting. We're through to the finals, but I had to take our creative director with me because he had to explain how we would approach the design. So we took them through the process of how we analyze which color sets we end up with, why certain typefaces are selected, how will they work well together, how does it impact their brand collateral or not, is the naming of the project even appropriate, and what kind of approach the design would take. But I still haven't submitted a design, so keep your fingers crossed I win the tender. But from a design perspective, the designers have had to learn to justify their decisions on research, on metrics, on trackability. And the designers get blamed if a site doesn't perform. The first thing is the client goes, the design's wrong. They don't go, oh, maybe the information architecture didn't quite work out the way it should, or maybe our search engine optimization isn't up to scratch. The design is sort of like the target. So you need confidence, and go on presentation skills. Do some training. Not a lot of it, but do. It's worthwhile.
Lovely. Oh, sorry, one more. One final question.
So, yeah. In terms of employability for visual designers, what do you look for? What's the most important thing for them on the portfolio?
Flexibility.
Flexibility.
We employ freelancers sometimes, but that's normally on the illustration side of things, or when it's video or 3D animation. There's some things that we could theoretically do in-house, but it's nice to have fresh skills and fresh eyes come in. So we do use freelancers quite a lot on custom illustrations. For an illustrator, illustrator and photographer, you're looking for a particular style that's going to fit that product brand. But when it comes to visual design, the designer needs to understand information design and UX. And the designer mustn't have a style. I know that sounds really weird, but I've shown you a lot of work today. They don't look the same, do they? They look like they were made by different people. They weren't. So employability is proving that you can adapt to a commercial environment. With all my stuff about confidence, you also need to accept as a visual designer that the client's decisions don't always make sense. They never will. I've had to change an entire corporate entity because the MD's wife didn't like orange. I'm not kidding. This is after we've gone through the whole brand process. Numerous rounds of sign-off. Didn't like orange, but hey. But there's things in design now that are important. So for example, if you're looking at something like e-commerce, that's going to need to be trackable, and they're going to have to shove advertising in there and do horrible things like show special offers. And that kind of thing, it's a business requirement that you need to design around, particularly on the commerce side of things. Or, you know, on Oxford Street we had a thing now where the logo, it's a new brand, we didn't do the Oxford Street branding. Lovely agency with the name of Goosebumps did it. But the red X has come into contention on intellectual property rights somewhere. I don't know who the brand is, but they made them change the red X, which is why we now have a Christmas light X. So I've got a meeting with a client later this week to find out what's going to happen. So as a designer, you need to be aware of a lot of things. But employability is understanding a little bit about licensing and copyright, because that shows you've got a broader skill set. Understanding the implications of a fat giant roller image and what will happen to that if it's going to a different medium. So just illustrating those soft skills of usability on different mediums will give you an advantage. Because young designers don't think about that. It's kind of, it's my idea, this is me, this is how I see it. Whereas to make money from graphic design, you have to be able to make how the client sees it.
Okay, thank you very much.